Kia ora and welcome back to Wellywood Wargaming. On this wet and windy, miserable day, I've decided to come out of the garage because it's just too loud in there, to be honest, and do a little video for you. I did ask last week in a post on YouTube what videos or any ideas that you had for videos for me to do regarding Necromunda, and what sort of subjects you'd like me to talk about, basically. And the one that came up most frequently, it seems, was house rules. Now, house rules are obviously rules that you can change and abbreviate to your own needs in the game of Necromunda, and of course make things a bit clearer, or perhaps just make things a bit more common sense in terms of gaming terms and stuff. So I've created a list of house rules here that I use. I don't use all of them. I do use most of them. These are house rules that I would recommend for you. Again, this video is probably not for the new Necromunda player, it's probably for the slightly more experienced Necromunda player, I would say, or at least for arbitrators running campaigns as well. But what I'm going to do is go through the list that I've got here and just explain my reasoning for using that house rule and how I might implement it, and also just the why, really. And there are quite a few, so forgive me, this is a little bit discordant. The list that I've made is a little bit all over the place. It doesn't go in a particular order, so bear with me on this one, but we're going to go launch straight into it now. The first thing, and this really does depend on what kind of terrain that you use in your Necromunda gaming groups, whether you play your scenarios on 2D terrain, Zone Mortalis, etc., or 3D, Sector Mechanicus, things like that. But this one really is more of a common sense one, and it's the vision arc. So a vision arc of a fighter is 90 degrees from the front, right? So the vision arc vertically needs to be explained. So that hasn't really been explained in the Necromunda rulebook at all. But if you are playing on 3D terrain, I would suggest that the vision arc of a vertical vision arc on a fighter should be 180 degrees. So you can see, if you're looking ahead, the fighter can see straight up, basically, to the sky. That one is kind of just a common sense one, but I would certainly implement that and just make that a thing. Obviously, you know, if you're on the ground floor and you're facing in the direction of someone who's up on the 5th floor, if you can see them from that model, if you can get right down and have a look, then that vision arc is legit to me. So 180 degrees vertical vision arc is a house rule that I would use. Moving on to the next one, and this one is something that we do implement in our campaigns here at Wellywood Wargaming, and that is to only have, or only limit, one super champion per gang. What I mean by that is, in the actual house lists, you have Naxgals, you have Death Maidens, you have Stimmers. Only one per gang maximum at any point throughout a campaign, I think, is a good rule. Not only does it make them feel even more special, but it's just to stop things getting completely out of control, because those three that I mentioned in particular are very, very powerful indeed. I think you can have as many normal or regular champions as you may, but with the super champions, I would say just stick to one. The same thing goes for witches in Chaos Helot gangs. I think they are limited to one anyway, but just have some common sense on that one. I think maybe just go for that one maximum on those particularly special pieces in the game, and it will make things feel a little bit less crazy. Moving on now. Now this one's a bone of contention with a lot of people, because they did errata this. Games Workshop did errata this recently to say that you can't really do it. The first thing is charging and not fighting. I don't know how I feel about this, because playing a Horde gangs in the past, like Cawdor with Bone Pickers and stuff, you used to be able to charge in and not fight, thus not getting any reaction attacks back. Now that was a little bit gamey, but it really does depend who you're playing, because if you're charging in with a bunch of rats like I do, if you've watched any of my recent battle reports, I have a Beastmaster with 3 pet rats. These pet rats are terrible, but if they were allowed to charge into combat, not fight, charge another one in, not fight, charge another one in, and then get the +2 for the assists. Realistically, if you're thinking common sense terms, that would happen in a real situation. If you've ever been beaten up by a bunch of people, which I have, that happens. They all hit you at once. They don't just take it in turns. So from a logical perspective, it actually makes sense. But the real thing I'm talking about here, actually, rather than that one, I'm not so sure about that one, but the real thing I'm talking about here is, can you move and then fight? I would say yes. In the actual rules, it says that you may charge and then you get a free fight action. I would say that you can choose to move and fight. Of course, you can do that with a versatile weapon, but I think that you should also be able to move, negating the 1-inch rule, and make a fight action, seeing as they are 2 basic actions there as well. Well, move is simple and then fight is a basic. So that's my 2 cents on that one. Again, there are lots of schools of thought on that with how gamey it is. I think, again, just be a nice person, don't abuse these things, but I don't think there's really a problem with what I'm suggesting. The next one is stray shots. Now, stray shots, I think, are too likely to hit the other fighter. So a stray shot, if you're gamey and you line up a shot with a fighter behind another fighter and you always make that cool check, if you fail that cool check, then you're quite likely, it's 50-50 really, to hit the fighter in front. I would say stray shots only ever hit on a 6+. This is a rule that I would like to see implemented generally. I think it's kind of fair, you know, a 1 in 6 chance of hitting the stray fighter is much nicer, because otherwise you can pretty much always try and make that cool check, and if you fail, shoot the fighter in front. So stray shots, including those that are in combat. So if a fighter is engaged, I would still say that you only hit the other fighter. You still get the -1 to hit, of course, shooting into engagement, but you're only ever going to hit your fighter on a 6+ as well. I think that is quite a good one. The next one is quite interesting as well, and this really does depend on the types of scenarios you're playing. But bottle tests, I believe, should take into account reinforcements. What I mean is, if you have a scenario where you're starting with 3 or 4 fighters on the board, for example, but you have the rest of your crew laying in wait as reinforcements, if you take 1 serious injury, you're very, very likely to bottle based on your starting crew, as is. So I would say include the reinforcement value as against your bottle tests. It makes every bit of sense to me. I can't see anybody really arguing with that one, to be honest. I think that's pretty fair. Otherwise, your games are only going to last 10, 20 minutes, you know. So there you go, that's that one. Right, the next one. I would say if you're using limited ammo, that you can only have a single type of limited ammo per weapon. You can't stack. So for example, gunk bolts on a bolt gun, for example, they're not particularly powerful, but you can only ever have 1 on that weapon. Say you've got 2 bolt weapons, sure, you can have 1 on each. I would say limit the limited to 1 per weapon. That seems to make sense to me as well. Moving on now, the next one I would say is inorganic targets. Now, what do I mean by inorganic targets? I mean robots, androids, buildings, etc. Do not be affected by toxin, blaze, gas, or web, in my opinion. That seems to suit the fluff a little bit. I don't think robots would particularly be worried about toxin or gas particularly. Web I think is too powerful in general, so I think putting it onto inorganic targets as well does help a little bit, but there aren't that many inorganic targets in the game anyway, apart from maybe ambots and stuff, and they're also quite powerful. So that one's just up to you really how you want to interpret that one, but I think that's a pretty good one as well. Like, you can't set them on fire and stuff too. The next one I'm going to talk about though is Suspensers. Now, if you get a Suspenser with a really powerful heavy weapon, it's too easy to just run around shooting stuff, in my opinion. Sure, it's very expensive in terms of its credit cost, but I would say treat a shoot double action as a straight ballistic skill check, but if you move and shoot with a heavy weapon and a Suspenser, it should be -1 to hit. I've seen this used in a couple of other gaming groups, and I kind of agree with this one as well. So that's that. Now, the other one is some brawn skills. Now, brawn skills are notoriously weak compared to other skill sets, I would say. I like them, but I still think they're quite weak. The 2 skills that I'm thinking of here are Hurl and Headbutt. Both are basic actions, and as written, you cannot use them as part of a charge action, so you'd have to be standing and active in engagement with a fighter to be able to use either Hurl or Headbutt. I would say change that so that you can charge and hurl or charge and headbutt, because it's just hilarious. If you charge in and headbutt, it makes a bit of sense, but charging and hurling also does as well. Just pushing somebody off a rafter or something is kind of hilarious. It also does make them slightly more legit skills, I would say, as well. Infiltrate. Another skill that we have issues with. Infiltrate is a great skill. It's not broken, but it can be depending on the scenario that you're playing. So if you're playing a scenario where you have to, I don't know, sabotage something that's in the middle of the board and you just infiltrate a fighter in there and do it first turn, of course that's a bit broken. So really just use common sense with your opponent not to game the situation with Infiltrate, because it can be very broken, and you can win a scenario in a matter of turns very, very easily using the Infiltrate skill properly. Well, not properly, but too well, I suppose. Right then, what do we got next? Overseer. Overseer is another skill that we don't see much use in our gaming group, mainly because everyone got sick of it. It feels like a waste to give your leader Overseer. Generally, I know people love the Overseer skill. To me, it's too powerful. I would say, rules as written, it's too powerful. I think that Overseer just needs a minor adjustment. I would say that your leader would need to make a leadership check to actually pull it off. To me, that makes a lot more sense. I mean, granted, most leaders still have very good leadership, so you're passing it most of the time, but I think just being able to make that check does take the edge off it being quite so nasty. So that's that one, that's Overseer. That's my 2 cents on Overseer. I don't personally use the skill. I just feel like it's a little bit cheesy and doesn't really suit my style of play. The next skill that we want to talk about here is Fast Shot. Now, Fast Shot, I see a lot of use on shooty champions with grenade launchers, plasma guns, things like that. It's way too good as is. If you remain stationary, you may shoot twice, basically. It makes the shoot action into a simple. I would say change that so that if you are using it, then it's a -1 to hit. Simple, really simple, an effective solution to that one. You're still probably going to be hitting most of the time, but just give it a slight nerf just so it's not so powerful. That's my 2 cents on Fast Shot. Sorry if I'm going too fast on these, by the way. I just want to get them all out of the way in this video here. The next one is about weird powers, and this is something that a lot of people I've seen discussing on forums and stuff, and this is maintain control. So rules as written, maintain control is an action where you have to use on a continuous effect weird power. Now, continuous effect weird powers are kind of shit unless you change this rule a little bit. My suggestion for maintain control is that it's a free action at the start of your turn, and you just need to pass the willpower check to maintain control, but it is a free action. So you can still do it as a free action. You've then controlled the power. You can then move and do something else as well. So it makes sense to me that it's not a full action to do, and perhaps it's just free. So, moving on to something else which we see a lot in our current campaigns is Insanity. Now, I think the Insanity trait, or not trait, but the Insanity condition on fighters is broken. It's really, really powerful. If you get made insane and you have quite a low willpower as well, you're just not getting out of it unless you're very, very lucky. It's a 1 in 3 to act normally, and then you still have to pass your willpower check at the end of it to make sure that you're not still insane. I've seen Goliath gangers out for entire games due to Insanity, and it's no fun at all. I would say maybe implement the willpower check regardless of the dice roll. So if you're rolling a 1 or 2 and the fighter becomes broken, you still make the check to see if they're not broken at the end of their activation, but you also do the willpower check to see if they're still insane too. Likewise with the 3 or 4 or whatever it is, if the fighter becomes activated by another fighter, that's really harsh. So I still think you should roll the willpower check at the end of our activation to see if they get out of it. Again though, if you've got fighters with low willpower, then it's still very hard for you, but it does take the edge off it a little bit. The next one is Omen of Fortune. Now, Omen of Fortune is a skill that you get on familiars, so Gene Stealer Cult familiars, Psychic familiars, and Chaos familiars as well. Rules as written, you can use them to basically avoid taking shots entirely. It is far too powerful, and you can also stack it with multiple familiars as well. The common sense thing here, and the one that I've seen in lots and lots of forums and stuff as well, and all over the internet, is only giving the Omen of Fortune once per round. So you really do have to, if your leader has a familiar and you're getting shot at by all angles, you're going to have to choose very wisely as to when you use the familiar. For me, familiars are 25 credits or something. They are far too good. They are broken as hell. Cherubs as well. Cherubs are a bit different. They're also much more expensive as well, so they're not quite so bad. Another thing, Terrifying. So Terrifying really applies to Corpse Grinders a lot with the Corpse Grinder masks. We all know that Corpse Grinders are very powerful. We all know that the Terrifying trait on Corpse Grinders makes them very hard to play against if you have low willpower. I would say something to balance that slightly now that we've got more Psykers in the game is that psychic powers can target those terrifying fighters, as long as the psychic power doesn't count as either a shoot or fight action. So you don't need to make that willpower check unless it's a shoot or fight type of weird power. Does that make sense? Sweet. So moving on now. Ogryns and Enforcers can trade normally. I think this is something that's just common sense, otherwise Ogryns just are already quite boring, but it makes them even more boring. But trading freely from the trading post, I think, for both of those gangs there. Immunity to insanity on Chaos Corrupted gangs here. So Chaos Helot gangs, as written, the champs, leaders and witches are immune to insanity. That's fine, the gangers aren't. But rules as written, corrupted gangs, Chaos Corrupted gangs, all of their fighters blanket get immune to insanity, which makes them kind of better than Chaos Cultists, if you ask me, which is not fair. Change it, make it just champs and leaders that are immune to insanity. The other one, the next one, and it's along the lines of what I was talking about with the Super Champ, is there is a maximum of 1 brute per gang. Not 1 brute type, but just 1 brute in general. I think brutes are already very, very cost efficient generally, except for maybe the Ogryn, which isn't very good. Otherwise, they're pretty good. And ambots as well. You don't want to see gangs with several ambots coming at you. It's just not cool at all. So 1 brute per gang there. The next one is about Venators. Now, Venators need a little bit of they need a bit of love. I think the only thing that's happened to Venators since they came out in White Dwarf was that they got the addition of weird powers. I'm currently playing Venators and I'm really enjoying them, but I do think they need something out there. But this one is in terms of recruitment. So if you get free recruitment from your settlement in a campaign, of course Venators do not have Juves, and some other gangs don't have Juves as well, like Ogryns and stuff too. If you do roll that 6 on your settlement, I would suggest, and one that we've agreed on, is that you get a free ganger, but you roll randomly to see which ganger type that is. That makes sense as well, just so you can't just choose the ones with toughness 4 or ballistic skill 3 or whatever. You get a random one. You might get the movement 3 one if you're not very lucky. So there you go. Excuse me. That's the Venator one there that I've got there. Getting towards the end now, there's a lot of house rules here. I hope you're keeping track of all these. The next one is, and we do it here, I've been asked, like, why don't you roll more injuries per fighter? We maximize the amount of injuries. If a fighter goes out of action, they only ever roll 1 critical injury or 1 injury roll. We don't like to stack injuries. Nobody likes injuries. It's no fun at all. Sure, we take them still, and we still have plenty of fighters die, but we don't roll multiple times on their injury table for 1 fighter. We just don't think it's right. So that's the one we do there. Just a bit nicer, especially for new players as well. The tactics deck. Now we're getting into our specific campaign stuff here. The tactics deck that we choose is we pick 10, and they are always random. You never get to choose your tactics cards in a game. They are always random, and that's nice as well. So you never really know what you're going to get, but you've only got 10 to choose from. So you know what your deck is. You know what you might get, but it might not be exactly the right thing for the game. So you can't plan that way. Another thing is we've costed tactics cards and underdogs cards differently. So tactics cards in a gang difference are now 150 credits worth, and underdog tactics cards are 300 as well. So we've changed the price on them slightly. The other one, and this really does relate to a lot of the scenarios, because a lot of the scenarios, the way that they're written is actually kind of broken in the way that you can win them just by bottling out voluntarily. I would say if you ever bottle out voluntarily, ever in general, you by default lose the game. That should be a given. If you bottle out and you go, nah, fuck this, I'm out, you lose. It's really as simple as that. That's how it should be. Yeah. History of Violence and Dangerous Footing are 2 tactics cards that I would suggest banning from your group, both of which are just no fun to play against. Dangerous Footing I've seen used when we started playing Necromunda, and first turn leader goes out of action, rolls a bad critical injury, boom. The other one, History of Violence, is just like, you're not bringing your best fighter to this game. It's too powerful, I would say, so ban those 2 cards. There are a couple of other cards that are very powerful too, but those are the 2 that really stick out in my head in terms of the broken tactics cards there, and those are available to everybody normally. The next thing is bounty mechanics. Now we have a bounty mechanic in our group. What this means is every time you win a game, you get +1 to your bounty. What that means is that if you play someone with any bounty whatsoever, depending on how many games they've won, I might have won 3 games or whatever, they get +3 to a 2d6 roll. And then we have a table, and if you get an 8 or more, you get a tier 3 bounty hunter, tier 2 bounty hunter, tier 1 bounty hunter, depending on how high your roll is. What that means is we get much more use in Dramatis Personae. We've listed all of the tiers for the currently available Dramatis Personae that we believe fit into tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And the way that you would remove a bounty is by taking a fighter out of action while you have a bounty hunter on your gang, and then that will wipe the slate clean and then the bounty starts again. So it's a nice way of balancing things. Quite often we get free bounty hunters and scum that way as well, and it does mean that you get to use those Forge World models, which we all love so much in games as what they're supposed to be. So next thing is components in the blacksmith. Again, this is part of the Goonhammer article, Lost Zones or whatever it's called. I would say that the components in the blacksmith rules are excellent. Basically what it is our loot crates don't contain anything but components, and what that means is that your house list is locked off entirely. You can never access your house list except for when you're hiring and recruiting a fighter, or at the very beginning of the campaign before you played a game. What that means is you have to collect components. Once you've got a certain amount of components, you can then use them with money, with the credit cost, to buy stuff off your house list. Otherwise, you are restricted only to the trading post in the black market. This is a really cool rule. I can explain that in more detail for you, but it's on Goonhammer, so go look that one up. I love it. I think it's great. Same with the bounty mechanics. That's also on Goonhammer too. So shout out to Goonhammer there. Trading across alignment. So if you are a lawful gang and you want to go to the black market, it takes a cool check to do it for your leader, and if you are an unlawful gang and you want to go to the regular trading post, then you have to make an intelligence check, or vice versa. I can't remember which one it is, but it just makes it a little bit more tricky to do it, but we like it that way. That works quite nicely. The next thing is inducements. So similar to Blood Bowl, in our campaign here we have created an inducement system. What that means is you compare crew ratings, not gang ratings, crew ratings at the start of a game, including reinforcements of course. And should your crew be much less than your opposition's crew, you will get the difference made up how you want. So you can take extra tactics cards, Underdogs cards, Dramatis Personae, and hired scum, things like that as well. It's a really good way of balancing things out a little bit. So check that one out as well. The next thing that we do in our current campaigns, if it's Dominion campaigns or it's Law and Misrule campaigns, what we'll do with the rackets and territories is we'll generally half the amount of money that you can generate from them, and we'll usually half the boon as well. So if a territory, say, has a boon and some money, we'll just scrap the money and keep the boon. Or we will, if it's just, say you get 2d6 times 10 for that territory credits, we might half it to just 1d6, for example. I think this is good. I think there is too much money in the current Necromunda, certainly in those Dominion and Law and Misrule campaigns. I think there's just too much money floating around. So limiting that a little bit does make it feel like original Munda, or old Munda, as I like to call it. So I'd recommend doing that as well, personally, but it's up to you. And the last one here, the last one, and one that I think is quite important as well, and on the same note as money, is that we cap winnings to a maximum of 46 times 10. So that caravan heist mission that you want to play to get loads and loads and loads of money, it's capped at 46 times 10 credits. So it's still a lot, don't get me wrong, but it's capped. You can never go above 46 times 10 credits on any scenario that you play. Those are all my house rules, or all the house rules that I approve of, and the house rules that I recommend to your gaming groups, and the house rules that I think work really nicely. Again, I'd like to hear your comments on these things, and there are some that I'm missing here, I'm sure, but this is just what I came up with when I was just trying to write them all down from my head, because I am one of those people that doesn't go through books much. I'll just go through the stuff in my head and often miss things out, so I do apologise, but I hope you enjoyed this anyway, and I hope that answers some of your questions about Necromunda house rules there. Please do like, share and subscribe, and I will be back with another video real soon. Peace out.